The A7R IV just got announced, yesterday by the time I post this video. Sometimes it's very easy to fall into the trap thinking you need the latest and greatest camera gear, and that's not always the case. So I just wanted to talk about some of the features of the A7R IV, who it's potentially for, and if you even need to pick it up. The A7R series of cameras is basically for photographers. It does video as well, but the main reason you're gonna pick up an A7R camera is because of its photo abilities opposed to what it has for video. So the camera actually has the world's first 61 megapixel full frame sensor. Do you need 61 megapixels? Probably not, but depending on what you shoot, 61 megapixels could come in very useful. It means you can crop in really, really far and still have a really nice tack sharp photo, if that's what you want to go for. 15 stops of dynamic range is what the camera has. If you're not familiar, dynamic range basically means it can capture everything in the shadows in great detail, everything in the highlights in great detail, and then everything in between. So it does that better than, say, a camera that only has 12 stops of dynamic range or something like that. The higher the number, the better. And 15 is really high. I believe the A7III is 14, so this typically will shoot better highlights, shadows, than the A7III would. Has your 5-axis optical in-body image stabilization, so your IBIS, so if you are shaking the camera around a little bit, or you need to use a slightly slower shutter speed, you can, and the camera will counteract any little movements that you're gonna have there. Now, Sony's IBIS isn't the greatest, it's definitely not up there with something like Panasonic's, but it's still better to have than not have it at all. If you have this body with a camera that has image stabilization built into the lens, those two together work really well. 10 frames per second shooting with full autofocus tracking. So that means you can use the autofocus tracking that's available in this camera, technology that came out with the A6400 and is now on the A9, A7 III with software updates. You have that full AF tracking at 10 frames per second. So if you're shooting sports or anything that's really fast moving, that's gonna be really useful for you. Real-time IAF for still, movie, human, and animals. So on the 6400, the A9, and the A7 III now, you all have IAF. The camera uses AI technology or software to detect where an eye is, and then it stays locked onto that eye, and if you move around, it stays locked onto that eye, it picks up the eye for what it's gonna focus on, and it's really good because typically when you're shooting a photo, you want to have the eye in focus. So it has that, but it also now has it for video too, and it's live. And what that means is you can view it on the screen as it's happening, so you can see that your eye is actually in focus. That's a really big deal. That is probably the only reason you would want to get the A7R III for video. Aside from that, its video features seem to be, from what we can tell so far, the same as the A7 III. So, if you want that, might be a reason to pick up this camera. Quite expensive to just get that feature though, and something I will say is, look at it this way, is the A7 III's autofocus even that bad? The answer is no, it's not. The A6400, the A7 III, the autofocus on those cameras is incredible. Do you need that IAF just for video? Probably not. At least in my opinion anyway. You think what you want, but I don't think it's necessary to get this camera just for that feature. 5.7 million dot OLED viewfinder, so your viewfinder, what you look through, is going to be an OLED screen. OLED screen's really great for more natural looking colors. Your blacks are going to be blacker. In short, that's what that means. 4K movie recording, S-Log2, S-Log3, HDR. Again though, the A7 III had that, so not really an upgrade. It's the same video features that is in the A7 III. Now, because this is a photography based camera, obviously you have 61 megapixels for shooting, which means you can crop in really far, have a nice clean crisp image still, and probably get rid of a ton of the image and still have something usable. You probably already know, but the A7 III shoots at 24 megapixels, and then if you want to go into crop mode, basically gives you 1.5 times zoom with no loss of quality, at least in video, but for photos it drops down to 10 megapixels. With the A7R IV, you have 61 megapixels, which is still huge, and then if you want to shoot in crop mode, so 1.5 times zoom, or if you're using a crop lens, you actually have 26 megapixels. So that's more megapixels than you have at the A7 III when it's shooting at its full sensors readout. So that's pretty good. Again though, this is a reason why you'd want this camera for photography. That's not a video feature, it's purely a photography-based feature and a feature that photographers are going to use. Is it enough for me to buy this camera? Probably not, because 10 megapixels is more than enough, to be honest with you, most of the time. But if you're in a situation where you need to crop out a lot, that could be a very useful feature. Dual card slots as well, the same as the A7 III. The grip has been improved, it's a little bit more grippy. I will say the grip on the A7 III here, although it's nice, it's not, this bit sticks out a little bit more on the A7R III. It has enhanced dust and moisture resistance, so it's a little bit more weather sealed. The A7R IV has a much clearer, crisper screen than the A7 III does. The A7 III only has 921,000 dots, so that's its resolution. The A7R IV has 1.44 million, so we're talking like pretty much 50% more resolution. So big gripe I have with the A7 III screen, it's just not that clear, it's not that crisp, and you won't have that problem with the A7R IV. Nice crispy screen, so everything looks good when you're looking back at it. Easier to spot flaws, look at your focus, so definitely benefits of having that higher res screen. So yeah, that is the A7R IV. As you can tell, not really any benefit to getting this camera purely for video. If you have the A7 III, the A6300, the A6400, you probably have all the video features that the A7R IV has in it already in your camera, even in the A6300, which is, what, 3 years old now? So if you're thinking about getting this camera for video, I would say don't bother. Just wait. The A7S III is probably, I mean, who knows at this point, 2 years away, 6 months, could come out next week. Actually, there is another Sony announcement apparently next week, so we'll see, but probably not the A7S III. We can hope, but probably not. Anyway, yeah, so if you're thinking about getting this camera for video, I would say don't bother. It's just not worth it, at least in my opinion. If you don't already have a camera and you're potentially looking at getting this camera for video, just get the A7 III or the A6400 instead. You're not getting any real benefit to getting the A7R IV other than that live IAF focus, which is nice, but not necessary because the autofocus is still great on the A7 III, A6400, A6300. The A7R IV doesn80 have 4K 60, in case you were wondering. Just has 4K 30, same as the A7 III, same as the A6400, same as the A6300. 1080p shot 120 frames a second still. Again, same as the A7 III, 6400, 6300. There just isn't that difference that we thought we'd see. But then no one really expected the A7R IV anyway, so I guess nothing lost. I do think that we will see 60 frames a second, 4K with Sony camera. I just think that it's going to be on something like the A7S III, just because the A7R IV is designed for photos. You're not going to put a lot of video features in that as well, because it's just going to kill some sales from the A7S III whenever it comes out. So they're keeping those two separate. I think when the A7S III does come out, it's going to blow people away with some of the things that they're doing with it. It's been so long coming. They've really got to do something amazing with it, otherwise people are going to be so disappointed when it comes. So that's my opinion anyway. Also, from what I can see, it doesn't have a flip screen. I don't know why they didn't bother to include this. The A6400 has a flip screen. It's incredibly useful for people like me shooting videos like this where I can see everything on the screen, I can see I'm still recording. I don't know why they didn't put that on there. It seems like such a simple thing to do now. It works exactly the same way as all the other Sony screens, it just flips up. Don't know why they couldn't have done that, so doesn't appear to have a flip screen. That's my thoughts on the A7R IV for video. If you maybe want to get it for photos, then yeah, it seems like a great camera. 61 megapixels is huge. Cropped APS-C mode at 26 megapixels, that's a big deal. It would be very useful for some people depending on the situation. But for video, just doesn't seem like it's worth it. All right, I've done a lot of videos this week. There's been a lot of news. Amazon, another video that came out yesterday by the time you watch this one, and then this video. Probably gonna take a break for a couple of days now. I'll see you guys next week. See you later.